Morning, everyone. For some reason, my chat box is broken. Hold on. Not sure what's going on there. Hope everyone's doing good this morning, or afternoon, or evening, as always. Just gonna get things set up here. CPI 25 minutes ago. Yeah, it seems like, who knows how the actual market reacts, but the reaction this morning doesn't seem that big. And I haven't really looked at charts yet, to be honest, but that's not that big of a spike. It looks like it just wants to give it back up. Crazy sell-off yesterday. I mean, that was insane to watch after I got done trading. I would just, every now and then just Google the market to see where things were at. I mean, this sell-off was sharper than the first one. It was still like a 5% move down from this high to this low. I mean, that's insane. Having two of those. Interesting enough, like we didn't break the low by that much. I wonder where 50% of this move is. Basically already retested it. We pretty much came up and, I don't know, tested somewhere over here. Not really like a clean area of a bounce. Definitely makes sense to retest this before we go up if we do. I think it definitely makes sense to try and be aggressive right now with entries, with the idea that, hey, the risk reward is probably a lot bigger than you think if you can catch a move. Kind of like this. I don't think there was a trade up here, but just with the idea that, hey, the possibility of this is there. And we can have a rip up that fast too in this market. I don't think popping up here today is out of the question. I think there's a couple, resistance zones on the way up. Interesting on a daily though, it's just very, I don't know, almost inconclusive of a move. It's not closing super bearish on the day. It recovered a lot of it. By the close, it had done a 50% pullback basically. So it just, ripped people's heads off who were long, trying to, catch the move to the upside, or were still just holding and then just, did a V bottom because it just got so overextended. We don't really have any other news today either. Oil's not really doing anything. Oil inventories are today at 10:30, but that doesn't really do anything, especially in this market right now. It'll cause a little bit of a spike and chop into it, but usually it's not really that big of a deal, I would say. And it's not really going to be affecting the market. This morning moves looks like we want to give up this fair value gap though. I don't really know much about CFD trading. To be honest, there's so many different things out there. A lot of even I honestly don't even know what that stands for. There's so many abbreviations and everything in trading. Um, it's impossible to just know everything that's out there. To be honest, I wonder if this pullback as well as a 50%. And it's still breaking that. Probably like the 6-1, 6-8 something, whatever that level's called. 618. Pretty much bouncing right off that 618 level. So I mean, we're kind of just bouncing between. We're kind of just recovering between each of these moves. This is a recovery of that move. This is a recovery of that move. So I think things have got a little healthy now. We'll kind of see where things go from this open. I think it can really go either direction. Um, and what was interesting was, I think the S&P 500 yesterday. I guess the sell-off was maybe about the same. But looking at it like, let's say on a daily chart, I think it's sold off more than the Nasdaq. It pretty much almost, or you could say it tapped this area where I would assume that it would bounce, you know, versus the Nasdaq on a daily. To me, that same area, because it's pretty much what for the 1st of May is that bottom, and here's the 1st of May. The S&P 500 gave that back up. The Nasdaq is still a massive gap above that. So it's still very much way above. Trying to see if there's any other trend lines here going on. I mean, it seems like we've pretty much broken them. There could be something like this channel. Doesn't look totally unreasonable. But we've definitely broken it to one side. I wonder if this just pulls back and just bounces off of this. Because the CPI release, the news was right here, caused this pop. Seems like we want to give that back up. Have I found myself peeking at the ES? I haven't. I've had the urge to, and it's more of, especially the last couple of days while I've been trading, and mainly just because I want to look for that confirmation almost. Before I stopped looking at the ES and only looking at the Nasdaq because it's simpler, and I thought that looking at both just really just added more confusion than clarity, and so I've been having the urge to look at it for honestly emotional reasons in terms of just wanting more confirmation. And I'm trying to get away from that and realizing, hey, I don't need more confirmation. I actually just need to get better at jumping in when the signal's there and realizing it doesn't need to be perfect. Yesterday's move was insane. What do I mean by the first 30 minutes this morning? The first 30 minutes when the normal stock market opens. Because, yeah, futures are open 24/7, but um, the major moves still happen after the normal market opens. And so that's at, 9:30. And so to me, I always find the biggest moves, and especially the initial volatility in the first 30 minutes, is where a lot happens. Yesterday, right? Looking at yesterday, the first 30 minutes, um, we opened, popped up, and then just started this rip. And so that trap happened in the first 30 minutes. And that's usually what I like to look for. Even in hindsight, looking at this, there was no signal to get in based on my strategy. Just with how it was acting, like big picture, there was like, hey, there is a potential for like a failed breakout of that high. But it seemed that like there wasn't a good enough signal for me in terms of a level to shoot off of. And maybe there was a bigger picture signal, but that's just, I'm entering on a 1 minute. Maybe there was a 5 minute or a 30 minute or something that said to be able to get in on that. But, that's not a time frame I'm trading. So, you're not going to capture every move. And taking that long yesterday, I think was a mistake, and that was kind of frustrating afterwards. But it's like I'm frustrated about it because it felt like a mistake in terms of like, okay, I know I already have a rule essentially of, okay, if there's a big strong downtrend, don't try and reverse it, because I know from a lot of just looking at this so much is like that big strong moves like that are unlikely to reverse. Obviously, I didn't think that this was going to happen, but even if it doesn't continue, it just has more likely to just do this, and it's unlikely to reverse a big move and make a good trade possible. I think that's the rule the majority of the time, and right now I'm trying to get better at not reading into the micro signals that keep me out of trades, and just the micro patterns of sticking with the big picture. And the big picture down here was like, hey, we have had a good pullback, an unhealthy move to the downside. We're at a big picture level where I think we would reverse. And so that was good in terms of focusing on that and then not getting bogged down in, okay, what is the kind of micro signal here to jump in? More of like, okay, the signal's there. We've made a nice little bottom signal. Jump in, wait for the bigger picture to play out, and my stop's in a good spot if it fails. But thinking about it now is, I think the read that I have on, okay, don't try and reverse when a trend is so strong to the downside, and I have that read that this is a strong trend that could, it's not just a quick little whip like this guy that has a good chance to reverse. That I think goes in the big picture category of reads, and so I need to respect that going forwards and saying, okay, even though there's a couple signals down here of the big picture has a zone, we have an unhealthy move potentially, but the read is like, hey, this is not necessarily an unhealthy move, it's just a really strong move that could continue. I need to stay out of it. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about that. Obviously, this specifically is some of that's hindsight. Like, obviously, if that reversal worked, maybe I wouldn't be thinking that way. But from looking at just those levels a lot, and really how my read was that it was a strong downtrend yesterday. And so I think just having that intuition already kind of there is something that I'm definitely kind of still thinking about, and why I think just thinking about that specific point still makes a lot of sense to go with that read essentially. I'm just going to zoom out here and kind of look at levels. Like, what is this bouncing off of? I guess you could say it's bouncing off of this right now. Um, I mean, big picture NASDAQ on a daily is essentially we're still down here. We could bounce anywhere in here. Do I think yesterday's high is a good profit target? I mean, if we really get going, that would be the initial. Yes, that would be the initial target of like, oh, it's going to give this whole move back up. I think before that is this level and this level. These are the two other levels I think the market has to push through on the way up. That's kind of where I have them is, overnight high here on this bounce or yesterday's close, honestly. And then yesterday's lows before this kind of push up. Generally with my levels, I'm just looking at the major swings, right? Where those are and how we react to those. And right now it's, we're kind of in the middle ground between these two levels. And in terms of big picture direction, I mean, I think I don't want to try and guess too much in direction because it's anyone's guess, right? I think it's trying to just see which way the market does a fake out and see if that fake out looks like it's going to fail. And so I think if we make a stab lower this morning, I'll look to reverse. And I think if we make a stab higher this morning, I'll look to reverse that as well. But also keep in mind that, hey, what are those? If they don't set up a signal and they look like they're going to continue lower, I won't take that trade either. I think it's easy to try and, or it's almost impossible to really try and have a major bias in a market like this where, yesterday to me, yesterday the read to me was like, hey, I think we could really here was like, okay, we're at an inflection point. I think we either go up or down because it was a 50% pullback from this major swing up here. From this high to this low, essentially once we pull back, that we could go up or down. But no one could have predicted that we were just going to drop 5% like off a cliff. And it's, of course, some people get lucky and make a killing on that, but I don't know. I find it's not that worth it to focus too much on missing out on a day like that because it's just it's so rare. Did I lose money yesterday? I did. It was only like a half size. Um, that long. I was just talking about it a second ago. But it was just trying to see if things were going to reverse that morning sell off, and then obviously the market the bottom fell out, and that happens. Got 15 minutes here till things open. I'll try and look at chat for a little bit, answer some questions. Hopefully, not go on a tangent too long. You do need to subscribe to ask questions. Have I ever thought about just about trading continuations as well? I've kind of tried because logically it makes a lot of sense. Oh, if I think this is an inflection point in the market where it's going to go up or down, why not have the option of doing either? But it just added more complexity. It added, I think, unseen things that you wouldn't think were there. Like for me, when it pops up here, it's easy for me to be, okay, this looks like a good spot to reverse for X, Y, and Z. And then you think as well, okay, well, if those fail, it's going to go up. but sometimes neither works, or you get stopped out, or mentally you start seeing signals for either direction and confirming um, both directions in a way. And so it gets a little um, confusing, or not necessarily confusing, but just adds pull in both directions that makes it, I think, more difficult to trade versus keeping things more simple. But sometimes it's like I will get in on a pullback if it pulls back to a spot that I like, and it's like, hey, I count this as technically a reversal. But that needs to be much more of a bigger move, essentially. Because CPI came in today, doesn't that mean the market's going to go down? No. Just because the news goes one way doesn't mean it's going to go the other way. You have no idea what's priced in, and we could have a move like on Friday where the news didn't seem to do anything, and then all of a sudden the market just died because people were reading into that in certain ways. But now that we've had two of these huge moves, um, there's a lot of people getting destroyed in the market right now. I wonder what the put call ratio is doing. Let me see if I can pull this up. If it'll actually look anything decent. It's still not that crazy. I don't really think there's much to read here. Like the put call ratio is still pretty bullish. So it's just showing that there's still people that are really just long the market. I actually don't know how often this updates. What's the date today? The 10th. So it might take a little bit to update here. This isn't real time. But usually it's, like here you can see this is during like the initial crash. Not crash, but like sell off we had from the Middle East. And the put call ratio is way higher. Like this blue line is the put call ratio, and it's trading around 1. And that's usually when the put call ratio is that high, that usually signals much more of a bottom in the market. Versus here, we're at these highs, and the put call ratio is still all the way down here. And so, we could sit here for a while, sell off again, and this could eventually shoot up. And then to me, that would signal more of a bigger bottom. So to me right now, based on that, I think they're big picture, there's still plenty of downside. But that's, that doesn't necessarily play into today. That's a very big picture that plays out over, months, I would say, or weeks at least. Any advice for trading options? How to set a stop loss? I haven't traded options in a long time. So I feel like I would be doing it differently now than how I did previously. But I think the big thing is I would still like to do it based on the movement in the chart. So like if the chart, if you have, let's say, a call on this market and the market breaks this, you say, okay, well, I want to jump out there. It's almost instead you just have an alert that says, okay, we've hit this price. I need to close out. Because it's really hard with options to actually calculate what the price is going to be when it breaks that level. That's part of the reason why I don't necessarily like options. Just because it's the pricing is is not linear or 1-to-1, Just waiting on things here. It's pretty choppy, but I kind of thought we might sell this move off, but it seems to be holding it at the moment. Pretty choppy morning so far. Just kind of waiting for things to open here. I'll kind of go through everything again as usual. I'm just kind of looking through questions here, scrolling down to see if I missed anything. This is not pre-recorded. You can literally see that it's if you pull up the same chart, it's real time. Big news 15 minutes after the open. I don't see anything, at least on Forex Factory. You know, there could be something else. Maybe even when Trump speaks, it'll put it on here. So I don't know what that potentially is from. Am I buying SpaceX? I am not going to touch that thing, but it'll be really cool to watch Friday. I don't know how I'm going to try and look at it because I don't really know if I can pull it up on NinjaTrader. But it'll be kind of interesting to see just the open and even just on the NASDAQ because it goes on the NASDAQ, I believe, right away, which is kind of crazy. It's kind of, you know, there's kind of people that are, I would say that's, I'm missing the word, it's a debated topic of if it should be going on a index right away. I think the S&P 500, I believe, said no to that right away because the idea is that everyone's 401ks and all these big funds that, you know, have to buy are just looking to follow the indexes all of a sudden are buying those, and it just pushes the price massively up. And doing that for an IPO where it's tech and the valuation is insane, I think to me does seem a little, I don't know. People say like, oh, it's you're just making everyone's 401k like exit liquidity and stuff, which, you know, I don't know a crazy amount of how that works, but definitely seems a little sus. Could I explain the put call chart in greater depth? If you mean the put call ratio chart I just did, I pretty much explained roughly how I look at it. I mean, it's just really just big picture stuff of like if the put call ratio is like at literally just 1-to-1, where the ratio of how many puts and how many calls is roughly the same in the market, that's usually a bearish signal. A bullish signal. And then on the flip side, um, usually you don't really use it the other way because generally the market is bullish and the put call ratio will be less than 1 and favored in the bullish side. Did I ever have a different trading strategy than support and resistance? Yeah. I mean, I just like everyone else, I bounced around from different strategy to different strategy. Um, you know, I initially did options and did more of trades on stocks, and I used something called the TTM squeeze. Um, and I had some success with that, but it just didn't. It wasn't really like I didn't like swing trading because I didn't really like holding stuff overnight. And so I try to move away from that eventually, and I rotate into futures. I am trading the Nasdaq futures, so it's technically not a stock. The platform I'm using is called NinjaTrader. It's mainly a futures focused platform. If you're looking to start, it's a great way to go. I've used it for over 5 years at this point. You can get a ton of really good add-ons. Um, there's a link sometimes in the chat for it or in the description. My strategy, to quickly run through it for people that don't know, I do have tutorials on my YouTube channel that go into way more detail, but essentially I look for, the market's going to open here at 9:30 Eastern time, and I go to a big picture chart, kind of look at where these blue boxes are key reversal zones, where I think, okay, if the market comes down here, I think this is a spot where it might bounce. And so I want to look for a reversal off that level. Or if it pops up here, I want to look for a reversal off that level. Now, I'm not just going to blindly do that. There's reasons why I'm jumping in at those spots. And, I have a kind of a checklist up here of what I want to see. And I will walk through and talk through everything I'm seeing, when I'm entering, why, what I'm seeing. But the basics is, I look for a move down, something like a double bottom, and then look to enter in and capture the move up. And so, I use like a 1 minute time frame to enter, but a 5 and 15-minute chart to look about big picture. So big picture bias for the day. I mean, just looking at a 15-minute, crazy sell-off yesterday. I think this move was 5% in the NASDAQ. The S&P is pretty similar. I mean, this move was sharper than the first move. I think it's pretty impressive. To me, this could be definitely a good potential reason that this could bottom. I mean, this is a crazy amount of fear injected to the market. A ton of people that were buying over here thinking that, okay, we're just going to buy and continue higher, probably got screwed by this. We have essentially done two healthy reversals in terms of reverse this move a little bit and then reverse this move a little bit. And so we're still definitely in an inflection point. Like, we could just continue to go down. In terms of like big picture trend or channel that we could be in, I mean, it's something kind of like that. I mean, moving up that would be a pretty big move. I'd want to see how we react to these levels. And you really keep in mind that I think we could still go any direction, because a move like this yesterday was just out of the blue. And I think there is more downside potential. But in this market that has been so bullish, this could just be, I talked about this earlier of like, if you look at a daily chart and if you think that we're in, if we're in some kind of like 2000 tech bubble, like it could go like this, but there'll be crazy volatility. Like if you think about Bitcoin, and how much volatility there was on the move up, it had in its bubbles that it had. It had crazy pullbacks like this. I remember in like the first kind of bubble it had, or maybe it was the second one, where it like went to 10,000 and then pulled back to like 6 or something, and then went all the way to 19 again. And so when markets get really frothy like that, you're going to have crazy moves to the downside, even though big picture, it's just a pullback. So that's something to keep in mind too. And so why I want to try and stay really neutral on my direction, because we could just gobble this up at some point and just continue higher. So market's open now. And there was some news pre-market. We'll kind of see how the actual market open reacts to it. But we'll kind of see. Which side do I like more? Honestly, I think today, based on yesterday's move saying that there could just crazy moves are in the market. I think what I want to try and do is be a little looser with where things are at and try to look for whichever way this fakes this morning. Try and take a reversal. Knowing that, okay, maybe I get burned being aggressive, but the potential for a large move is still there. Now, if it's just going to open choppy and be choppy, I'll reel back on that and be a little more cautious, seeing that the market's opening choppy, but still looking for, maybe at 10 o'clock we get something and giving it a little more time. Yeah, it's really hard to read into kind of some of the big picture stuff. Could be a bullish flag that's continuing up, but 5% moves just don't come out of nowhere. It's interest rates, and that was, I think, a big scare of interest rates kind of potentially coming up because the job market was pretty hot last week. And then also, obviously, oil is still just high. At some point, inflation is going to start climbing and rates are going to have to go up to start combating that. And that's going to slow down the market. But there's just so much money coming in because of AI too. That's why it's hard to think of, oh, well, oil's high, that means inflation's high, and interest rates are going to go up, so the market should sell off. But there's so many factors going in. That's why it's hard to really predict a lot of that stuff sometimes. Nice little lower high here pattern. I still like this fair value gap for giving back up. Part of me wonders if it's a little too aggressive to just jump in on that. Big picture, there's kind of this downtrend line that looks like we're trying to hold right now. Did I take a trade yesterday? I did. I tried the long. Didn't work out, obviously, because the market just sold off all day. Trying to be a little chill this morning. Personally, I'm pretty dang drained right now, and I would say exhausted. just week wise. Um, I feel pretty burnt out. So mentally, that's just making me, less, I would say less focused and less with it. And so knowing that is important for focusing on my trading and how I want to approach things. Um, I feel a little frustrated on the trade yesterday and Monday because I felt like I made mistakes. Obviously, even though Monday was a win, I felt like I mismanaged it in terms of jumping out a little too early on half of my contracts instead of holding for a little bit more of a pullback. Um, but trying to have that, the growth mindset is that was a great learning opportunity because again, I'm still getting used to scaling out and scaling in, and so I'm gonna make those mistakes, and you just have to learn from them and move on, and adjust. Same thing with yesterday. Um, it was kind of a mistake from me pushing the envelope on when to be more aggressive and when not to, and so trying to the tired, burned out side of me wants to be just frustrated with it, more emotional about it. And, in reality, it's like, hey, those are total fine things to do. Really, they're good learning lessons and that'll improve my trading going forwards. But that's just, you always want to try and be aware of where you're at mentally, day to day, week to week, just because that it affects your trading. And especially in this market that is just so crazy this week, it feels like we're getting it feels like we're getting crazier every week. Like last week, I think seemed crazy, and the week before that seemed crazy, but it's just kind of like stepping up and up. And obviously this week is just ridiculous. Or I guess Friday was technically the first big move, but the last few trading days have been insane. And for me, just this the all that is just just slowly building. In terms of I personally haven't had a good like reset um, from the stress of like trading and streaming and business things, and so that's just something waning on me more and more until I can try and reset better or things calm down a little bit. It's hard to and it's hard, but it's really impossible to try and be perfectly disciplined every single day. Even last night I was like, oh, I don't want to do my nighttime routine and go to bed. I just want to chill, but it's like, oh, I need to go to bed, get good sleep, because you got to do it again tomorrow, right? I'm too emotionally regulated. You want to see me punch a monitor? Well, you wouldn't see the monitor. You would just see my fist go close to the camera. Wasn't I off last Friday? I was. But I think at the point I'm at, like I almost need more of a reset than just sometimes just an extra day off isn't enough. Nice little spike here. Kind of retesting this zone, you could say. Especially for me, because it's my brain doesn't shut off over the weekend. Like I am thinking about trading, YouTube, my business 24/7. And so it takes me more than a couple days to like really decouple from that. And that's my own stuff to deal with, that affects my trading. Nice little spike here. Like I was looking for a little stab higher to reverse, but I don't think it's enough. Like really, we're just kind of in this kind of chop right now. Like if I shorted here, the thought would be, okay, it needs to break down to here, which is possible. Like that is a decent risk reward ratio. The idea that, okay, it faked lower, now it faked higher, and then it's going to continue lower. And that would be, testing this low here. But I want to see some kind of double top. I'm not going to jump in just with how I am right now. I'm not going to jump in on this as a V top. If it goes, it goes. But right now the market seems a little choppy right now. It's not at a major level like yesterday. Yesterday's V top was at a major level. We're middle of the range right now. What is a confirmation on my checklist? Usually just like a break. Like if I look for a bottom here and a double top or a double bottom here, the confirmation would be breaking above the previous swing. So I would have an order in here, and as soon as it kind of popped up and broke that, that would be confirmation. What made me change to the NQ from the ES is I was using both of them, but I felt over time and looking at things and realizing how things were playing out was I thought it was just better to just focus on one in terms of clarity and simplicity. The thought is, oh well, I can compare the two, get more confirmation, and in reality, it just wasn't. It was just causing more confusion than clarity. Little up channel right here. Nothing really off the highs, but take a month off. The problem is I'm too ambitious. I have such a work drive that it's hard for me to do that. A week I can go do, but it's looks like we're making a little bounce here. I'm glad I didn't do, these little thoughts of like, oh, just enter in short right here at the open, or reverse this little move because we're going to shoot lower. Like those were very aggressive thoughts. And in reality, like, today those aren't, that's how you can get stuck trying to be overly aggressive is the days they work out, amazing. But often on days like this, it just, you would get chewed up. When it hits the main reversal level, why don't I think it'll be a full breakout? I think it really depends on how we get there. We have this level to go through, this level to go through. Those are more minor ones. Definitely this is the larger one right now. It really depends how the market gets there. Like how I use all these levels is the whole idea is I want to see, when the market essentially does a move like this, it's overextended at some point. And so it has to have a reversal. And it has to have a big move, like, even if it's a 50% pullback where it does this, that's a great trade if you capture some of that. And so my whole philosophy is I'm looking for a big move like this. Obviously, this is extreme, but something that looks like this to where it's unhealthy. And then if it hits a zone that I like, that I think is, a good support resistance zone, I'm looking for a reversal. And so if we pop up to one of these with a move like that, I'm going to look for, okay, I think this is a spot where it could pull back, even if the big picture trend is going to continue higher. On a smaller time frame, on a 1 minute, you can still capture a small move like this, and that can still be a 3x trade. And so that's how I like to look for those. And if it comes up to these levels and it's healthy like this, that's to me is okay. It's too strong. It's healthy. It's not going to have it's less likely to have a deep pullback. The deep pullbacks happen when it's overextended like this. Because it's, think of it like a rubber band, and you stretch it too far, it has to, it has that urge to pull back essentially to its equilibrium point. That's just like the basic idea of how I use fair value gaps, unhealthy moves, I call them as well. You can even see here, we have like a big move up, it pulls back. Big move up, and we'll see what happens. And these are too small to take a trade off of. And so it's kind of finding that middle ground of where it makes sense. Have I considered putting a starter position? I am actually working on scaling in and scaling out. And so that's something that's been throwing a wrench in my trading recently too. But over time, I'm getting more clarity on it and figuring it out. And I think it'll, improve my trading over time. Because I think while I've been streaming, my ability to spot the areas where things are reversing are still really good, but my execution just hasn't been great. And so I'm trying to get a little better at the execution. I'm trying to think of numbers like my accuracy with, okay, is the market going to bounce in this area has been, like 70, 80% versus like my win rate, I think, especially with the last week having a couple losses with no win, is more like 40 or 50%. And in this market with my sizing or with my risk reward ratios, it's like I've been kind of 1-to-1 risk reward. So the results wise hasn't been playing out great. But that's something that I'm trying to fix and get better at. And that's just how trading is. It's always a growth game. No matter where you're at, you're always going to be looking to improve. And sometimes big adjustments damage your profitability. But the idea is that, I'm focused on the growth mindset, the long term. Even if I have a couple of months of struggle, where am I going to be in 6 months? I love this. One person is saying, appreciate the streaming, take more time off to rest a bit more, and then the next person is saying, sleep when you're dead. It's always hard to find a balance with things. My wife's always like, I told you so. I told you you should just stream 4 days a week. And I'll be like, I know, but I don't want to. We're at this first level. I think the question is, are we kind of in this move right now? And again, this to me is, these are not massive reversal levels. These are where, okay, I think this is a minor level. We could slow down a little bit and continue higher. If we are super overextended at them and we do show other signs of weakness, I still want to pay attention to it because it's a spot where, um, again, I don't want nothing has to be perfect, right? And so that's kind of that thought process on how I use these more minor levels. But to me right now, this is a pretty healthy uptrend. I think we could pull back here and continue higher. It's not overextended enough for me. And a quick, easy confirmation of that is there's no fair value gaps on a 5-minute of this move up. That's usually a really clean sign. Now, I will say, like, this is probably the biggest level on the way up until up here in terms of, like, this is where it initially reversed. So we could, do something like this. We just have to wait and see how it reacts here. That's a pretty nice big bearish candlestick. The charting I'm using is NinjaTrader. I use NinjaTrader for my charts and my brokerage. And so, I'm just trading the NASDAQ futures here. I think this is definitely falls in the boat of my topping signal. Like this is a nice big rejection candlestick. I think personally with just how I'm feeling today and how this is, I don't think super unhealthy of a move. I don't think I'm going to jump in right here. I think maybe one more test of that around 10 o'clock looks pretty good for a potential reverse lower. I don't think there's a huge unhealthy move like I was saying here. But I think with just the market right now, the potential for just a slower top to turn into something big is still there. How do I think SpaceX IPO will affect the market? Well, it's going to be in the NASDAQ right away, from what I understand. So, volatility. I mean, it sounds like there's so much hype over it. That to me makes it like it'll probably just open and go up, but also because there's so much hype and controversial hype, I think, it's anyone's guess. Definitely looking kind of toppy. The new me is kind of thinking this is a spot to jump in short. And tired me just doesn't want to do anything. So I'm going to try and re-engage here. I think the big thing is how is it coming down to test this? Like this is, I think, big picture breakout kind of pullback potential of retesting this high. And so I think it would be ideal to see what a bounce off of this looks like and if that's going to fail. And then I think if possible, I think if it does get going short, it's probably going to push these lows. kind of waiting this out. Big picture, I mean, I think checklist wise, definitely the major trend I think could go either way. Reversal zone, we are at kind of the major, I think 50% reversal zone here. Not really an unhealthy move. I'm going to leave that unchecked. And then trend, I mean, we're actually still holding this trend line. I think if we pop up here a little bit, kind of retest this big candlestick, but don't give it back up, I think that's a decent little, like you could say, well, there's the little head and shoulders right here. At the moment, you know, this looks just like a healthy up move. But I want to see, like, this does look like a good topping pattern in terms of how these candlesticks rejected that area. So I want to see how this tests that, and if it's, you know, kind of reading into the start of a potential reversal. Because like I said this morning, I would like to reverse whatever the market did, because I think the market's been so baity recently in direction. So just watching how this kind of push higher plays out. And if it's just going to continue higher, that's fine. I'll just stay out. Options premium are twice as they were yesterday. That's, I think, not surprising at all. I mean, probably Vega is through the roof right now. I actually haven't looked at the VIX this morning. It's above 20. It's you know, especially with that move yesterday, that's just crazy. I'm sure margin requirements for futures are still elevated a lot too. I am trading my own money, not a prop firm. We're all just baiting each other. That's how these markets can turn into sometimes. Because especially with the move yesterday, nobody wants to get caught on the wrong side of that. You know, nobody wants to take a big bet in one direction. Because just the likelihood of this falling out of bed again, you know, that's just on everyone's mind. Kind of starting to top out here at this spot I said I would like. At 10 o'clock right now, which is potential timing for a reversal. 5 minute doesn't really have much, to be honest, in terms of signal. I think if this does sell off and breaks a new low here, I think I'm gonna hold off on entering at the break of that. I think I want to let it stab a little bit and potentially bait to the downside. I think that's totally possible here. And so I'd rather see that break this low, show a little bit of weakness and strength to the downside, essentially, and not immediately reversing, and then push lower. I'm just going to be a little more cautious today because where things are at for me. And it's just, I think it could go either direction too. getting this move here. I'm just going to do half size. No point in doing anything bigger. I'm going to have my stop all the way up here. Because that, to me, is where the high was put in. You know, it could totally pull back here and then continue lower. This trend line's broken. I think 5 minute looks pretty decent actually. Starting with these dojis here. I definitely like the look of that. We've broken that low. I kind of want to just see how this candlestick forms. Why I'm doing that and being a little safer is because it's choppy. I think it makes the likelihood of this to be a bait lower, and it just break this low and immediately reverse up. But if it does a little pop and then continues lower, I'm okay entering on that. But right here is I'm thinking it could just push up and be a fake to the downside. And then I think I would get in short here if it broke that low again. And that would be almost a long signal if I was a continuation trader. But it's also just choppy. I don't even know if it's worth taking a trade either direction right now. It seems like the movement is kind of just drying up. And just the way things are right now, it's pretty hard to read direction. The reversal pattern I was looking for is essentially kind of this to turn into a head and shoulders. But it was just too choppy here to go for a short. And that's why I wasn't looking to jump in. You know, if I jumped in on a break of this, that old me, you know, I've learned that over time, is that in these choppier markets, wait to see how this happens. And sometimes I'll miss it and it'll just go. But a lot of the time, something like this happens where it just makes a new low and shoots up because it traps to the downside. So just kind of sitting in this right now. Really nothing to do. You know, trying to be engaged, but you know, if the market's just gonna sit here, it's just gonna sit here. It is kind of a double bottom, like I said. Like this is, I'm not taking a long, but to me this is kind of a long signal. But the market just seems so choppy right now. It could just slowly, sluggishly grind higher, but I don't know. Right now it just doesn't seem like there's good movement in the market. And now this almost looks like a fake to the upside, right? Like it's just faking either direction right now. And so it's almost better when it gets like this is to just wait it out until there's a move in a direction. And then you can kind of look based on that. Like you want to wait for the volatility to come back. I think I'm just actually going to call it for the day, guys. Frankly, I'm feeling kind of nauseous right now. And I think that just the market's not worth staying, especially with how I'm feeling. I think it's better to just try and, even though I have a crazy amount of work to do today, try and just take that time to reset for tomorrow. It's tried to see something here, but I think it's just not worth staying. Even if I was feeling good, I think it's just worth it to, if you want to stay longer, I would say take a break and come back in like 30 minutes to see how the market's played out. Don't sit and watch this chop because it's just faking you out both directions. So I appreciate everyone being here as always. If you have questions, go check out my YouTube channel. I'll see everyone tomorrow, most likely. And stay patient in this market. It's really hard. So sorry if I missed some of your questions. As always though, I stream pretty much every day of the week, 9 a.m. Eastern. So see you guys next time.